Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Gina Smarecki. I'm the events manager at Nuspire, and I'll be your host for today's live session. Today's webinar features two of our cybersecurity subject matter experts, and we're really excited to present Nuspire's predictions for 2025. We're also going to have a little fun by taking a look at what we predicted for 2024 and how we landed with those predictions for this year. If anyone has any questions during the presentation, please submit them in the Q&A tab or the chat. We are planning to leave some time at the end for your questions, and don't feel shy. We will go ahead and address those if you submit them to us. This webinar is being recorded, just so you know. You'll receive an email with a link to watch the recording tomorrow. So with that, it is my great pleasure to introduce you to our speakers today, J.R. Cunningham and Josh Smith. JR is the Chief Security Officer at Nuspire and is responsible for the company's global security program and consulting organization. With 27 years of experience, he's an innovator and premier thinker in cybersecurity and risk management. Josh is our principal threat intelligence analyst who works closely in organizational threat landscapes, curating threat intelligence, and authoring Nuspire's quarterly threat landscape report. He holds a master's degree in cybersecurity technology, and he previously served with the U.S. Navy as an operations specialist with 14 years of service. He's been quoted in Forbes, CSO Online, Channel Futures, Dark Reading, Motor Magazine, and many others. All right, so before we hand this over to the speakers, we want to get your input on our poll. So let me go ahead and launch the poll here. All right. Hopefully everyone can see that now. The question reads, which cybersecurity topic are you most concerned about for 2025? Instead of reading all the answers, you guys can see those there. Go ahead and choose your answer.
And we've kind of learned a lesson for all of you who have attended these with us in the past, and that is we did not put all of the above because normally when we ask questions like this, everyone says, "Yeah, all those things. I'm worried about all those things." The life of a security practitioner. So thanks, Gina, for these. These are great.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll just give it a second here. I see some votes coming in quickly.
I think it's interesting here, Josh. You and I have talked about this. When we ask poll questions around, especially regarding our yearly predictions, uh, how many of these are brand new, cutting edge type of questions, but yet there are always some that never go away: vulnerability management, attack surface, new adversaries, the regulatory environment. Like it's this weird hybrid of these super cool, edgy topics that we're all very interested in, and then it's these nagging industry problems that never seem to go away. And it's funny how we're still trying to prioritize which one of these are our biggest concern over the course of a 12-month period. Fascinating to me, really.
Sure. I think that really shows the dynamicness in the ever-changing lifestyle of cybersecurity, that anytime there's some new form of technology, people understand or are concerned about how does that, affect my organization. With that being said, some of those are broader stroke things like vulnerability management and things like that, but those are challenges that organizations still face, especially when you deal with the operational dance between patch management and operational outages and things like that. And so I think a lot of times too, what we'll see from these poll answers, a lot of times it has to do with what your role is within an organization, is what's going to guide your biggest concern.
So we had over 80% votes in, so I went ahead and shared the results there. We got 47% AI generated technical threats in the top. Winner by far.
Yeah, not surprising. Certainly matches what we heard from the feedback from our two webinars that we did this year already regarding AI and the use of AI as a cybersecurity practitioner. Very interesting that we're worried about AI generated technical threats. And it seems like we're less concerned about new cyber adversaries. I think we're more concerned about what are the existing bad guys going to use AI for, and how are they going to use it against us. Very, very interesting. Vulnerability management still hangs out there, right? That's an age-old problem. It's been around since the dawn of our profession. Very interesting. Thank you all for your responses. This is we obviously, and I've mentioned this before in prior webinars, we use these poll questions to help guide the topics that we bring to you
Sure.
in the future. Awesome. So, okay, all of you that have followed us throughout the years know that this is one of our favorite topics, right? These yearly predictions. This is really, really hard because this is an industry that's ever changing. Our profession does not stay static at all, and much of the things that we have to worry about are outside of our ability to control. So, trying to predict what is going to happen over the course of the next year in our industry is really hard. We try and be somewhat specific about our predictions so that we've got a way to grade ourselves the following year. So we thought we'd first start with how did 2024 go? And if you give us a half a point for the ones where we graded ourselves with partial credit, we're just shy of about 70%. We're pretty happy about that. We feel like that's pretty good. Uh, you know, big kind of yes, we got it. We certainly saw a lot of the social engineering and AI stuff, really kicking up. We saw a changing in the profession and within these categories. And by the way, we're using the same categories this year, and just like we did in 2023, in 2024. Within these categories, we saw some threads in 2023 that led to a lot of our 2024 predictions, and those were around some of the fundamental changes that are happening in our industry as a result of more, adversarial experience and expertise, AI, of course, the changing regulatory environment, and then the geopolitical landscape. Unfortunately, we are still in a period of time where the world is at war, and so that drove a lot of our predictions that we made in 2023 for 2024. So you're going to see some commonality in our 2025 predictions. But in general, I think where we got it most right were our predictions on how there would be changes in the cybersecurity landscape and how it would change some of our activities. Where we got it wrong were really around regulatory change. We really thought some things would happen faster than they really did. Made a prediction last year about the healthcare sector, the vulnerabilities and attacks in healthcare driving new regulations. Clear miss. We didn't see a single new real regulation come out of that. We saw a slowdown in M&A activity that we didn't predict. So I would say all in all, we're pretty happy that we nailed the important ones. And I think the ones that we didn't nail, it'd be really easy to stick them back on 2025 and say, it didn't happen last year, it's going to happen this year. We didn't do that, by the way, but I think a lot of our 2024 predictions really centered around fundamental changes in how we practitioners operate. And we got a fair chunk of those right. So take a peek. By the way, if you disagree with us on the grade or you think we were too kind on ourselves, please call us out on it. We really would appreciate that. And again, this stuff also guides some of the decisions that we make on not only the products that we take to market, but also the types of webinars and questions that we ask you in the future. So really appreciate everybody that really gave us feedback last year as we were putting this together, just like with 2025. So with that, let's go into 2025. We try not to be overly ambiguous with these. We try to be somewhat specific so that we can grade ourselves. And we're going to start with Josh in the cyber attack landscape. So Josh, take it away, man.
Yeah, thank you, JR, and thank you, Gina, as well, for the introduction earlier. So starting off with the cyber attack side of things, an AI arms race between attackers and defenders. And what does that really mean? I think everyone here at this point has seen LLMs, AI, however you want to brand it, affect you in some way, shape, or form, whether it be simply something as simple as ChatGPT helping you review a document, things like that. Well, cybersecurity practitioners as well as attackers are seeing the benefits around that. And so what I think we're going to start to see here is higher and higher leveraging of this, both in defense side and offense side. And so as that happens, it's going to be this constant pacing of trying to step in front of the other one as new tactics and techniques come out based around AI, or whether that now be the filtering through massive amounts of data to be able to pull new trends out and be able to maybe pick up on some things that would take a human a lot longer to filter through all those different things. And that kind of leads me into my next bullet point here too. One of the things that I specifically think we may see develop here in 2025 is full-scale automated ransomware attacks. And what I mean by that is they're already using bots in automated scanning to go out and find vulnerable instances of the newest vulnerability that came out in the news or something of that nature. Well, now at this point, they can start using their own custom LLMs to go through and modify their payloads, modify the ransomware too, to try to stay in front of any kind of signatures, hash detection, things of that nature. And then once things are deployed, I could even see something along the lines of a complete negotiation LLM chatbot created by these ransomware operators to where they're completely hands off at that point. And so they basically can just sit back and collect a paycheck and maybe update the LLM as they need to. Along those lines too, another prediction that I have here for the year, specifically around cyberkinetic attacks. Cyberkinetic attack, if you're not familiar, that's going to be a cyber attack that has real world physical ramifications. One of the reasons why I think we're going to see something like that is the continuing brewing geopolitical situations that we're seeing on some of these different war fronts and things of that nature. I think we see something at this point of where that bubbles beyond just taking down some websites or DDoS attacks or something along that nature, to where actual infrastructure that's affected if there's not air gaps within critical utilities and things like that, damaging power plants due to those sorts of things. Anywhere you don't have those clear separations and air gaps, if those communications are talking, that gives a threat actor a great opportunity to cause some real world damage on it. The ramifications on something like that could be absolutely huge. So, I certainly hope that one's wrong next year when we come around to it. But, my gut says I think we see a step outside of that bubble. Additionally, another one I have here is fleet management and automotive supply chain attacks. Supply chain attacks are becoming more and more common regardless. There was just one a couple days ago for Clio products that broke a bunch of headlines. And if you follow any kind of cybersecurity news, I'm sure you saw it. Specifically, though, what we have been seeing a lot of really since roughly about 2020 and to today, security researchers are starting to find more and more vulnerabilities when it comes to automotive vehicles. They're basically computers on wheels at this point. But a lot of those things, too, are then managed by these fleet management systems. With those, if you think of like a supply chain attack where you get a hold of that proprietary top system, all those things it reaches down and talks to, if you get a hold of a fleet management system, you're now able to communicate with all those vehicles. And at that point, you could either deploy some form of a custom tailored payload to those things, to maybe where we see even a development of a car-based ransomware that locks out the entire entertainment system or locks out the ability to drive it. Or even if more malicious, you see something along the lines of a nation state who can take effect of something like that and shut down fleet management for emergency services. As more and more reports come out showing these vulnerabilities from researchers, I think there's going to become a point where it becomes a lucrative enough target for ransomware operators or financially driven gangs to really decide to put a focus on it and create a custom payload for that. Fortunately, right now, there's nothing really out there out of the box that they could currently use as far as like a Windows-based ransomware or something like that. It would have to be customly developed for it. But if you were to get into that and have a backdoor into that fleet management, that's a lot of things that you can get a hold of and potentially lock down for profit. And then last one we have on here for me specifically here would be the emergence of a fifth major nation state cyber adversary. Right now you have what's considered the big four. You have Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea. With that, other nations have been developing their cybersecurity programs, either for offense or defensive purposes. Two of the more emerging countries that have been stepping forward have been Vietnam. Vietnam specifically is more focused either in economic espionage They do as well focus on intellectual property and things of that nature. There have been historical attacks around the manufacturing automotive industry of attempting to steal schematics and data and intellectual property of that nature. But they're also very, very focused on any kind of the geopolitical things that are going on in the South Sea over there. So they are emerging and may step into the fifth spot, if you will. Additionally, another country that's also very much surging forward and has shown large developments is Turkey. Turkey has very much interest within their own geopolitical landscape, being able to control narratives, being able to control flow of information, but they have been witnessed doing cyber operations against Western countries, NATO, and things like that that directly affect the bubble around them. And so with all of that, they're very quickly advancing cyber programs that may be expanded soon from a big 4 to a big 5.
It's interesting, Josh. We saw a little bit of that out of Turkey when they were essentially kicked out of the F-35 program, and then they started looking for indigenous design capabilities for their own next generation fighter. And you look at some of these designs, you go, "Huh, those look kind of familiar. I wonder how they got a hold of some of that stuff." Right. So interesting that you picked those two. Any thoughts about North Africa or other actors in the Middle East? It seems like there's this perpetual arms race between India and Pakistan. There's obviously going to be a cyber component to that. We see, the Houthis in Yemen that are enhancing, things like ballistic missile and targeting capabilities. If we filled in numbers 5 and 6 with Vietnam and Turkey, who would be your next two? Just out of curiosity.
I do think, like as you mentioned, specifically, you start to see some of the other Middle Eastern, you wouldn't necessarily call them a country per se, but groups that
Yeah.
are very, very active in cyber warfare, because at this point, you put hands on a keyboard, anybody can go get a computer, and basically get involved in cyber operations. They are definitely very politically motivated towards Western organizations and things of that nature. I kind of looked at my specific major nation state adversaries as being, folks that are against Western interests at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Very much Israel, though, if you want to look at the other side of the things, are very dominant in the cyberspace and things like that too. And so I think when you have that, and then again, you have those geopolitical conflicts and ideology clashes over there, that makes the other side step their game up to be able to try to match and participate as well as they do. And with all that being said, generally speaking, that section of the world and those types of groups don't look at the Western world favorably. And so that gives them the opportunities and the capabilities to spread out and do more damage and conduct additional operations.
Sure. It'll be interesting to see where our grades look at, what they look like here and what we end up with, right? Fascinating.
Absolutely.
Okay, I mentioned we're keeping the categories the same over the years, right? Makes the grading a whole lot easier, and certainly does help us with being consistent in our predictions. So last year we had, I think, 3 or 4. Gina, keep me honest here. I think 3 or 4 predictions around security leadership and hiring. But want to just call out one, and I'm going to throw some sub bullets in here as to why we're making this prediction. So everyone's talking about talent shortage. This is a topic that just seemingly will not go away in our industry. And the prediction here is the talent shortages are going to persist, but they're going to pivot a little bit. There are going to be new pressures on hiring in response to AI's increasing role in our profession. And I think what's going to come out of this, and again, we're going to grade it not just on the bullet point here, but on this actual prediction that we're making. I think we're still going to see statistics come out in 2025 that say we're short X number of cybersecurity practitioners. However, that shortage is going to be focused in different knowledge domains than what it historically has been. So I think we're going to see a pivot in our industry, and we're going to see shortages of the right talent for the right business problems that are emerging at the time. And a lot of those are going to be focused on AI. And we're going to talk a little bit more about AI in a couple more predictions. But the prediction on security leadership and hiring is that the business world is going to expect something different out of the cybersecurity practitioner in 2025 than it has historically. The challenge that I'm laying out here for all of us as cyber practitioners is when we hear this stuff about cybersecurity talent shortages, And yet we see a lot of cybersecurity practitioners who are looking for work and can't seem to quite find the right fit. What's happening here? We have to peel that onion back a little bit. So the prediction is we will still see talent shortages, but they're going to be talent shortages of a different variety than what we've experienced over the course of the last half a decade or so.
Yeah, I agree. I think we're going to start to see a lot of demand for folks who know how to, integrate LLMs into software for custom designed LLMs for whatever an organization's desire is. Being able to interact those APIs, script out the backends for those sorts of things, and as well as being able to create the user interfaces for those in things of that nature. So absolutely agree. We're going to see, I think, a big focus in looking for folks who have that expertise. And right now is the time for all of us to sort of learn it at the same time and get sharper on it to continue to stay relevant in this space.
All right, let's talk about spending. This is where we normally would have the Jerry Maguire meme, right? What about the money? What are we going to be doing here? What are our predictions specific to how security spending has any kind of a change, and what are our predictions for 2025? I will say that when we make predictions on this, these predictions are in part some of the juice that we use to determine what we're going to do with our business. What products are we going to take to market as an MSSP? The product companies are doing the same thing, right? They're asking the question of what are businesses going to be spending on, what problems are they going to be trying to solve, so that they can roll that into their product and portfolio management activities. We corollary to the last prediction around security staffing, we definitely think that there's going to be increased budget allocation towards AI-based tools and critical infrastructure protection. Why? Number one, the talent shortage that we mentioned earlier. If we can use AI to make our existing limited resources more efficient, more powerful, more effective, we're absolutely going to want to do that. Businesses are going to want to do that. And also the whole speed side of the equation. The way we've been doing things in the last decade is just not fast enough to protect organizations. And so our profession is going to pivot. Businesses are going to pivot in order to being faster. You've all heard me, if you've attended any of our prior webinars, talk about the OODA loop, right? And staying inside the OODA loop and being able to make decisions and act faster than the enemy. AI is the answer for a lot of that problem space. So we definitely will see a pivot there. The days of kind of leaving the office at 4:30 or 5 o'clock on a Friday, turning the lights off and coming back on Monday to see what happens, those are over because of the threats to business and critical infrastructure. So we're going to see more spending around critical infrastructure protection for sure. I want to make a prediction here that we've noodled on for a little while, and it's an example of a prediction that it really doesn't have a ton to do with our profession, except we will be impacted by the shift in spending, and that is the energy requirements of AI. Our prediction here is in 2025, we are going to see a rapid shift in energy policy, specifically because of the just amazing amount of demand for energy that the AI revolution is taking. And I'll even take this down to a very personal example. If you look at what a high-end gaming computer today with some AI capability, let's say you're looking at like something like an NVIDIA RTX 4090 card with the Ada Lovelace architecture, right? And you're building out a fancy gaming machine. You might need to have an entire 20 amp circuit in your house dedicated for that particular machine. Now, extrapolate that out to the entire AI revolution, data centers and massive compute farms, and quantum as another example, right? So we're going to see a rapid shift in energy policy driven specifically by AI. This is important for us to pay attention to, even though it might not be something that we put a check in the box to say, okay, is that going to impact me as an individual practitioner next year? It's certainly going to have an impact on our industry. So one prediction I'm going to make here, kind of a sub bullet point to this, is we may run into a scenario in 2025 where we find some sort of limitation or rationing of AI compute if we start to hit the energy wall, and that will drive a significant change in energy policy worldwide, not just the United States, but worldwide. So again, that's one of those predictions that might seem a little non-cybersecurity-ish, but we certainly think it's something to pay attention to. AI is rocking the world in a bunch of different sectors, And one of those is the energy sector. If you look at where data centers are being built today, we're looking for massive supplies of water for cooling purposes. We're building data centers in places that are naturally cooler in order to use air cooling for things like these are kind of computational architecture decisions that in the past never really had to consider environmental or energy policy, and we're certainly going to see that in 2025.
Yeah, I think it's interesting you mentioned specifically the quantum computing side of things. While we didn't have any bullets in this at all regarding that, I think it's probably still a little too young to necessarily say for 2025, but with the Google's recently announced Willow, their breakthrough in quantum computing, I think come 2026, to make an earlier prediction, we may start seeing some of those effects. I think it'll probably be quite a while before we see that trickle to a point of where any organization could go buy one off the shelf. I mean, we're probably years and years away from that, but it makes me wonder what happens if a nation state elsewhere develops one, someone particularly like North Korea, who's very financially driven and looking to potentially use that for, weaker encryption breaking and things like that, or attacking cryptocurrency or things of that nature. So a little tangent there off of kind of what we've got in ours here, but coming up in the future, I think that's going to start hitting our predictions.
Okay, Josh, I'll pile on. I'm going to make a 2026 prediction. 2026 will be the effective year that PKI is no longer a thing. That's my prediction for 2026. So we'll see if elliptic curve cryptography can withstand quantum computing in the year 2026. So
start writing these down now. We're already ahead of the curve.
Yeah. Now, by the way, anybody on this webinar, you can't grade us next year on that one. That's a 2026 one, just to be clear. So let's talk about standard setting, compliance, the regulatory environment. Again, same category that we did last year. Major whiff last year on this prediction. I was certain we were going to see healthcare regulations kick in due to the fact that in 23 we saw all of these big, nasty healthcare ransomware outbreaks, and we even wrote a little bit about how it was time for a HIPAA replacement, pun intended, on the healthcare law, right? And it was time to do something a little bit better for the healthcare industry, something akin to maybe a deeper high trust or PCI standard. Couldn't have been more off on that one. Nothing happened. Not just nothing. The situation actually got worse. So going into 25, here are kind of three predictions that we think are going to be really relevant for the cyber practitioner and the things that we need to think about. First of all, and we're starting to see a little bit of this now, but it really hasn't caught the public's attention to the degree that we think it will in 25. There will be growing regulatory focus on the ethics of AI and its role in how we do everything, not just cybersecurity, but cybersecurity will also be a focus on this. So this is not just about how do we secure AI and how do we use AI in the course of our tradecraft. This is also about the ethics of using AI. And I think we're going to have a global discourse on that in 2025, and there will be more regulatory focus. One of the things that we know about regulations, and some of my favorites to kind of pick on a few from the past are like Sarbanes-Oxley, Gramm-Leach-Bliley. We know that sometimes when bad things happen, there's a knee-jerk regulatory reaction that leads to something hitting the streets. I wouldn't be surprised if we see some sort of, if not a focus, even some sort of a swing at a regulation of some sort on the ethics of AI. And I'll go a step further and say I could see maybe an international consortium like the G7 or the IMF or the WTO kind of taking the first swing at some sort of a global treaty style understanding on AI. Don't know exactly how that's going to take form, but I believe we'll see something like that in 2025. Some of these legislative actions, to go on to the next prediction, are going to be driven by public sentiment on AI and transparency of not just the cybersecurity of AI and LLMs, but also transparency about how these AI engines and LLMs are being used by governments, companies, et cetera. So we may see legislative action be driven simply out of public demand for such. An example of this would be what we saw in 2018 with the GDPR regulation in Europe, right? We saw the public start to demand more attention be paid to privacy, and that obviously that started way before 2018. But in May of 2018, when GDPR was passed, It was really a regulatory answer to public sentiment and public demand. So I would not be surprised to see if the public sentiment and demand drives some new regulatory behavior.
Yeah, I think we're
Uh,
starting to see. Oh, I'm sorry, didn't mean to step on you
no,
there,
go ahead,
JR.
Josh. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think we're not specifically for cybersecurity, but we are kind of starting to see already some of this, even with things like movie or like Hollywood, gaming development, things of that nature, where some of these producers in companies are already starting to utilize a lot of AI voice acting, AI development of art and imagery, things of like that. And you start to see that they're now putting disclaimers on there to say, hey, some of this stuff was AI content generated. And there are folks out there who are very much against when they see that and will not buy a product because of that. And I think that kind of leads into the ethical talk about do you purchase something when it comes to it being AI generated versus an artist or something of that nature.
Yeah.
So I think we'll see something similar though fall into the role of cybersecurity as well too as things move forward. So but yeah, kind of already starting to develop a little bit, I feel like, in other fields.
Yeah, we kind of saw that with the screenwriters strike. We saw it with the
Yeah.
dock workers strike, right? Both of those had very specific call outs for AI and restrictions on AI. So that might be some of the seeds, if you will, of a broader public sentiment around AI. And by the way, some of this is fear driven as well, right? This is a relatively new thing that most of us, all of us included, don't really understand the full ramifications of, or even to a certain degree how it works. So yeah, I think that'll continue in 25. Um, it would not be appropriate for us to do a webinar here at Nuspire without, in some way, shape, or form, mentioning insurance. So we made a prediction. I can't remember if it was 23 or 24 that the cyber insurance industry would become essentially the de facto standard setter for incident response activities. That happened. If you look in cyber policies today, the insurance companies mandate the providers that a company uses for IR. They mandate the amount of time for notification. They dictate who you notify first. All these kind of rules in place for IR. We are going to continue to see the insurance industry drive stricter requirements, including there are actually two predictions here. One of them is stricter cybersecurity insurance requirements. Period. And that might not only be driven by the insurance industry; it might also be driven by just the supply chain in general, right? Folks saying, "Hey, if you're in my supply chain, I expect you to carry cyber policies that are better than what you carry today." And then the second half of that prediction, the second one is we could see potential mandates for MSSPs coming out of the insurance industry. What does that mean? Maybe it means you can't be an MSSP unless you have a robust threat intelligence function. Maybe it means you can't be an MSSP unless you have 24/7, 365 global coverage. Maybe it means that you have to be compliant with certain regulations, right? If you work with the government, CMMC would be an example. We could see the insurance industry putting some mandates down for not just MSSPs, but MSPs as well. The point here of this last prediction is expect the insurance industry to use its significant weight to mandate changes in standards for how we operate in cybersecurity. They haven't let us down yet. We've been spot on every one of these predictions, and if you look at other areas in the physical world, how difficult it is to get flood insurance in certain parts of the country or fire insurance in certain parts of the country. We're seeing that same thing happen in cyber. It's just more difficult. The requirements are harder. The fees are higher. The coverage is lower. The exclusions are more frequent or more common. So we should expect to see that through the course of 2025. And if I'm wrong on that one, I'll eat my hat. But I think we need to call it out because it's a good one to keep in mind because it does impact some of the decisions that we make as cyber practitioners within the companies that we protect. Okay, let's talk about industry. And when we talk about industry, we talk about just the cybersecurity predictions for industry at large. So first of all, we're predicting that there will be reduced, maybe even significantly, state and local cybersecurity funding due to natural disaster recovery efforts and other political and geopolitical considerations. What do we mean by that? If we look at 23 and 24, we saw a lot of state, local government, education environments get compromised, ransomware. We saw some big cities get taken down in the last 2 years. These municipalities got significant funding to deal with some of the cybersecurity in their environments. However, if you look at how many natural disasters we've had, look at just pick one natural disaster, hurricane or fire or whatever it may be. Municipalities are never going to pick cyber over recovery from some of these other more tangible disasters. And so this prediction is really around we will see decreased cybersecurity funding, at least budgeted cybersecurity funding. Hard to predict what happens if we have a situation where a bad thing happens and we declare a disaster and the federal government steps in to help out. So those are kind of hard to predict, but we definitely will see reduced state and local cybersecurity funding, especially on the proactive side. Anyone in our industry knows that when bad things happen, we always seem to figure out a way to respond to the bad event, but we certainly should expect to see reduced state and local cybersecurity funding. And of course, the effects of that will be, we'll see more frequent attacks. And then, unfortunately, I think from a just broader industry perspective, we already saw one big one this year with the compromise of a major security platform that made everybody kind of fold their arms and go, ooh, that hurt. That hurt really bad. If we see another one of those, if we see a compromise of a major security platform, and what do I mean by platform? I'm talking about a major provider of cross-functional cybersecurity network endpoint, monitoring, detection, response, right? If we see a compromise in another one of these big platform players, it will drive a shift away from consolidated solutions and back towards more point solutions for cybersecurity. Not proffering an opinion on if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Prediction here is that we will see a compromise of another big platform player, and it will drive a shift away from those consolidated solutions. Excuse me.
Yeah, and I'd like to circle just a little bit back on the reduced state and local. Another thing with that too is the incoming administration has been very, very vocal about reduction in government. And so with that, it'll be interesting to see how things play out when it comes to funding, specifically for things along the lines of CISA, the FBI, the NSA, that are all very, very heavily involved with cyber threat intelligence, advisories to organizations, investigating for criminal prosecution, and in general, helping improve critical infrastructure's cybersecurity stance. So I've not personally seen anything to say that, like anything for sure is going to happen. But when you have these major reviews and reductions and things like that, sometimes cyber is one of the things that gets the axe. So I hope it doesn't happen. And I think those folks do great work over there and provide quite a service to the cybersecurity community. So hopefully, we don't see anything over there like that happen, but it'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
Yeah, Josh, you bring up a good point, and that is, shout out to our friends, Jen Easterly and her crew over at CISA, who just do a phenomenal job for the problem space that they have to deal with and the budgets that they have. And those of us in the MSSP space and the broader cyber practitioner community, we really depend upon them for a lot of intelligence, and they do a really great job. So I'm with you there and hoping that they're still able to do the work that they do. But I think regardless of where one's politics are, our industry is fundamentally changing, and the budgetary pressures on us are not going away anytime soon. And no one's immune to that. If you're a corporation, if you're a cybersecurity company, if you're an MSSP, if you're a government agency, we certainly are going to see that kind of budgetary pressure all the way around. And part of it is it's always been difficult for us to compete with the physical world when bad things happen, right? Well, here we are. We've got changing geopolitical landscape. We're a world at war. We've got a lot of kinetic stuff going on. We've got multiple, wars going on in the Middle East. It's really difficult for organizations to say, I think I'm going to spend that next dollar on cybersecurity. That's really the heart of where a lot of these predictions come from. So we always do this. Key takeaways. You heard these two practitioners ramble on about our predictions for 2025. I hope you can all see that we really enjoy this particular part of the gig. This is something we look forward to every year. We look forward to grading ourselves and kind of going around the room. How did we do? If you take anything away from this, it'd really be these four things. Number one, strengthening AI defenses. Question inevitably is going to come out of this key takeaway, key recommendation here, and that is, what do you mean by AI defenses? Are you talking about defending against AI-centric attacks, or are you talking about AI-enabled defensive technologies? The answer is yes, all of the above. So, AI-driven security tools to help counter not only evolving automated threats. Josh had a lot of predictions regarding the changing threat landscape and what cyber attacks are going to look like. This is also corollary to the talent issue and the need to stay on top of the AI stuff. I'll make kind of a corollary prediction to this key takeaway. If at the end of 2025, as a cyber practitioner, you're not conversant in how we use AI in our industry, you're on the short list to be a greeter at a retail place. It just, we have to be on the edge with this stuff. Business, and I'm already seeing it, businesses are coming to the cybersecurity practitioners and saying, you cyber people have been doing this a little bit longer than a lot of other parts of the business. What are your thoughts on it? What do we need to be thinking about? So it's a great opportunity. We always talk about being business aligned. It's a great opportunity for us to increase our value proposition to the business by being experts in this stuff. New regulatory demands. Again, I think most of these will be driven around AI. Of course, data privacy. We continue to see a lot of pressure on data privacy, a lot of blowback when bad things happen from a privacy perspective. So always keep that kind of in the back of your mind that there could be pop-up regulatory concerns regarding both AI, as we mentioned earlier, with kind of that knee-jerk public sentiment reaction, and then data privacy is always kind of in our backyard. We need to pay attention to. The bad guys are coming after critical infrastructure. That is not going to change. They are increasingly sophisticated with, just like we've been focusing on automating how we operate in cybersecurity. The bad guys, to Josh's earlier point, are really focused on how do they make money automatically with ransomware and fully automated attacks. And so we've got to keep critical infrastructure protected and secure to the best we can. Patch, keep the vulnerabilities at bay, right? Make it hard on the bad guys. Just because they have new tools, techniques, and procedures does not mean that we need to to do what we've always done. We've got to make it hard for them, push them towards softer targets. And then I mentioned the insurance thing. The insurance thing really, and maybe all four of these predictions are somewhat to this degree, but the insurance one specifically, keep some dry powder in your budget. If you're looking at, what are you going to do in 2025? The theme here is expect some difficulty from cyber insurers, especially if something bad happens. Expect things like we're starting to see even more of these windows where the coverage doesn't kick in for maybe the first 72 or 96 hours. So, having a healthy incident response budget for when bad things happen before the insurance dollars start to flow in is a key recommendation here. We think in 2025, that's just going to continue to accelerate. So hope you took more away than those four, but if you take anything away, we'd really like you to take away those four things. Certainly, that's what we're thinking about here. Number one is definitely number one. The whole AI world is a huge focus for us here at Nuspire PDI, and we're just really all invested in making sure that we stay on top of things, both for and with all of you.
Yeah.
So Gina, back to you.
Yeah.
I hope you're keeping score because the report card comes out this time next year, and we'll see how we did.
Thank you, JR and Josh, for presenting all of those and your thought leadership behind them. What a year, I guess it looks like we have to look forward to in 2025. All right, we do have some time left. I'm going to go through these resources real quick, but if anyone has any questions for JR and Josh while we have some time, go ahead and throw those in the Q&A tab or the chat. But at this time, I'd like to quickly just mention our next webinar So this is our last webinar of the year. We will be back in early February with our first threat report of 2025, which is actually reviewing all of 2024. So it'll be our year in review, cyber threat landscape report, which is always a very popular one. And so what I'll do is share a link for anyone that might be interested in just getting that on their calendar. There's a link going in the chat for that. It'll also be in the email that we send out. And of course, our website is full of fantastic resources. So take a glance at your convenience on those. I will share a few of our most recent ebooks, checklists, and guides here, and also in the follow-up email that I mentioned. These ones are all, I think, focused on mostly on AI that we've come out with recently. So if any of these are of interest, let me share here. And anyone interested in learning more about our Nuspire cybersecurity experience, we do have a really cool page dedicated to that with a lot of this stuff on there as well. All right, so we have some
Great.
time for questions.
Yeah, and Gina, I saw Bob posted a really great thought and
Okay.
a question here regarding, and Bob, thanks for this. Bob said, I'm surprised you didn't mention third-party assessments of cyber risk preparedness. Without question, supplier risk is going to continue to be huge in 25 and 26, just like it has been in 24. I don't know that we'll see any new regulatory mandates, and maybe this is one of those examples where I'm a little gun shy because the last couple of years I predicted some big regulatory drivers for some things and it didn't materialize. It's coming. It has to at some point. I will share this with Bob and everyone else on the webinar. The degree to which third parties are starting to really do the root canal on supplier security programs is certainly ratcheting up. Just as an example, if I think about our customers at Nuspire and PDI and the questionnaires that we used to get, right? It used to be like a little tiny lightweight like SIS 18 or a miniature ISO questionnaire. Do you have a security policy? Yes or no? Do you have a SOC 2 Type 2? And the intensity on those has gone way up, not just the volume of third-party assessments, but also the depth of them and the level to which organizations want validation that we're doing the right thing. So I think it's a really good one. We will absolutely see continued pressure on suppliers and the whole supply chain to make sure that, hey, I might have my ducks in a row, but if the business partner that I'm doing business with doesn't have their ducks in a row, I've got an issue. An interesting kind of little footnote to this, Bob, that I think we should pay really close attention to, and that is the boxing match that's going on right now between Delta Airlines and CrowdStrike, as an example. I don't necessarily have an opinion on that. Things will play out over time, but that's an example of, in this case, a cybersecurity supplier and a customer disagreeing over how things shook out, and they're going to ultimately duke it out in court. I want to watch that very carefully because it has a slightly different tone and tenor, those conversations, especially the public side of them, than what we saw, like, let's say, after SolarWinds or Kaseya or some of those other incidents that we saw in prior years. So I think that might be an indicator for us as to what kind of expectations are going to start to emerge regarding supply chain security and liability. Interesting corollary to the supply chain risk side of things is there's this whole liability component, right? How much am I liable for? How much are you liable for if bad things happen? And I don't think we've ever fully played that out in the cyber battlescape like we have in other parts of business. So, we see a lot of terms floating around that are like really extreme, right? Like unlimited liability and things like that. But I don't think we've actually fully, from a case law, from a contractual perspective, figured out what that's going to look like ultimately. So, really, really, really great point of conversation here, Bob. Hey, Josh, do you want to take this from Donna? Donna just posted energy infrastructure has been attacked in the past. Do we expect it to escalate? And what impact could this have on retail gasoline transportation, maybe petroleum
Yeah,
convenience retail as a whole. What do you
yeah.
think there?
So I think ultimately, as far as what impact or do we think that's going to escalate, I think you have to kind of take a step back and look at the ideology of the threat actor. So generally speaking, the majority of organizations out there today, your biggest risk is ransomware. And what is ransomware driven by? Financials. They want money. So typically what we find in those circumstances is they are looking for, as we coin all the time, the lowest hanging fruit. So what they're doing is when the brand new vulnerability is announced, they are looking for anyone, regardless of industry or things of that nature, uh, who's vulnerable to that, and if they can pounce on it or not. Because of certain cybersecurity budgets and things of that nature within certain industries that may be behind other ones, you may sometimes see an influx in a certain industry suddenly looking like they're vastly under attack. Well, it may just be that a brand new vulnerability was announced that only affects maybe their technology or something of that nature. On the flip side of the coin, the other group that would be more focused would be your nation state actors. What are they ideologically focused on? Typically, you're seeing things like espionage, you're seeing intellectual property, government secrets, things of that nature. So I think ultimately what it comes down to then is, do I think we'll see an escalation, as to the point of your question? Not unless there's not anything different per se as an escalation than what we're already seeing, unless a major vulnerability comes out that affects that industry specifically. I think we'll see a big jump there. When it comes to also convenience in gas stations themselves, I don't suspect they would be at any risk from a nation state actor per se. Now, when you look at the big oil manufactories and things of that nature, absolutely, that can be very much a target for nation state actors, because you do something like that and critically cripple the supply chain of oil and fuel and things like that. That affects everybody from military to logistics to supply. I mean, the whole shebang there gets affected. So ultimately, do I think it's going to escalate? No. I think we're going to continue to see what we see, but there can be some very major ramifications if nation state actors become interested and want to target that industry. So I hope that answers your question in a roundabout way.
Yeah, I agree with you, Josh. And I would just pile on there a little bit that, when we look at over the course of the last, let's say, between a half a decade and a decade, when the bad guys focus on an industry, they really focus on that industry, right? Look at what we saw in healthcare in the last 2 years. And so I think it's difficult to predict where they're going to turn their focus. What we often do is ask the question, if they're financially motivated, what are they going to go after? And then the second corollary question is, what are the softest targets that are attractive to them? You don't see a lot of successful attacks against the financial services industry because that industry is extremely hardened, and it has been for decades. So when the bad guys are looking for money, they tend to focus on that next layer down of softer targets, right? Individual consumers, healthcare, obviously healthcare, nice juicy soft target, in part because the regulatory environment doesn't really help that industry from a cybersecurity perspective. As we've talked about in the past, the HIPAA example, HIPAA really doesn't do much for actually keeping ransomware out of the healthcare environment. So if an organization is just managing to HIPAA compliance and they're not managing to cybersecurity excellence, they become a softer, more attractive target for the bad guys. Retail is much harder of a target than it was back in, let's say, the early 20 teens. Remember, we had those big, huge retail breaches and millions and millions of credit cards hitting the dark web and lots of really nasty consequences. That industry really has hardened itself up quite a bit. So I'm always looking for, what are the bad guys looking for, and what are the softest targets that they would go after to achieve that objective? And
Yeah, and
unfortunately,
I do want
sometimes
to.
those. Go ahead, Josh. Yeah.
I was gonna say, I do want to clarify too. That shouldn't be what I said is construed in a way of to say that ransomware attacks are decreasing, because that is the complete opposite.
Right.
But more of what I wanted to stress on that is specifically a focus on the energy industry when it comes to that. Again, just that low hanging fruit. Where is the latest vulnerability that they can get the biggest bang for their buck? Talking back about the third party risk, in the previous question as well too. Man, supply chains are such a huge lucrative target for them. If they can get a hold of that, then affect all the undersides beneath that. So Yeah, I wanted to clarify on that and specify that I don't think ransomware is decreasing by any means, but just nonetheless a renewed focus on the energy industry.
Get a lump in my throat, Josh, when I think about your fleet management prediction, right? Going after entire fleets of vehicles, or going after vehicular autonomy, or GNSS navigation, that type of stuff. I think that's an area of extreme attractiveness from a damage perspective, and it's also a nascent enough industry that we know there are gaps in cyber there. So that's in that. To Donna's question around specifically transportation, I think that's the one of your predictions that that really scares me a little bit. By the way, if you ever have a hard time staying awake at night, you just call Josh, and Josh will tell you some stories, and then you'll stay awake all night thinking about stuff. Cool.
Awesome.
Any
Great.
other questions?
I see one more question here from Dana in the Q&A. Dana said, I find it very interesting. Data center growth is also driving power production capability to power those new DCs. DC growth tied primarily to AI growth is my best estimate, and both become a shiny target for the bad guy. Any thoughts?
Yeah, and I think this nestles in nicely with the energy policy question, right? It'll be interesting to see if some of the very large hyperscale players start to get into the power generation industry in order to be able to scale faster and more effectively than the existing current grid infrastructure. I'm obviously not a nuclear engineer of any sort, but you look at some of the research and development that's being done around these like microscale nuclear reactors and things of that nature. We definitely think there's going to be something there where the hyperscale companies, and when I say hyperscale, I'm thinking of Google, Meta, Microsoft, Amazon, the big players in this space, right? Start to drive some not just energy policy change, but also some innovation change. And if you think that sounds crazy that a private company would build a power plant, I would just throw out there that it wasn't that long ago we thought it was crazy that a private company would build rockets. So I mean, we're entering a world where innovation is going to require some change in the energy sector. Dana, to your point, attractive to the bad guys. Oh yeah, for sure.
Nation states
And
very interested.
Oh yeah, and we could maybe even see. Normally regulations are driven by bad things happen, and then it's kind of a knee-jerk reaction to something. But could maybe almost see something happening where our traditional energy production cybersecurity regulations, think like NERC-CIP as an example, could be supplanted by a broader industry framework that may not be a regulation, something more like how the PCI standard is more, it's not a regulation, it's a consortium of interested parties trying to make the world a better place. I could see some energy policy coming out of consortiums of large AI companies as opposed to government regulation. This will be a fascinating one to watch play out. And by the way, I think it's going to happen fast, because if we look at some of the innovations in AI compute that are either here on the horizon, Josh mentioned Google's Willow chip that they just announced a couple of days ago, but even looking at like what NVIDIA is doing around their next generation of AI, both on the consumer side and the professional side, the business side of the equation, we're definitely going to see some required innovation in the energy space come out of this.
Awesome. Thank you, JR. All right. Let's see. We have about 2 minutes left. I'm looking to see. I don't see any other questions.
Hey,
Those
Gina,
were really good questions. Thank you for everyone.
if I could
Mhm.
if I could just burn a minute here to give a shout out to Gina and our marketing team. These webinars that we do, we really super appreciate everybody that takes an hour out of your day multiple times a year to join us on this. We enjoy doing them, and they wouldn't even come close to the enjoyment and the quality that we can bring if it weren't for Gina and the team. So
Thanks,
thank
JR.
you, Gina. Thank you to all the marketing team. We're just
absolutely.
this whole year webinar, this has been just totally fun and awesome. So we appreciate you all.
Awesome. Thanks. I've had a great time hosting, and lucky to work with experts in our field such as you fellows. So couldn't do it without the team. All right. Well, if anyone comes up with any other questions, you can email us at webinars@nuspire.com. We're always here. Um, Also, upon exiting the webinar, there will be a short survey to pop up, and we'd certainly appreciate any feedback that you have for us on today's webinar. And with that, any closing thoughts, Josh or JR?
Yeah, I'll just say thank you to everyone, for attending. I'm going to plug my own webinar that you already plugged earlier, the Q4 end of year. I'll be hosting that, so would love to see you back if you can make it. And yeah, thank you all and have a happy holiday season.
Thanks, everyone. Happy holidays.
Yep. Thanks for joining, everyone. Happy holidays. Have a wonderful season. Bye for now.